Harmony is defined in the dictionary as a tuneful sound, pleasing arrangement of parts, calm, tranquility. Harmony is really when things are working smoothly, things are going well as they're designed to work. We've been talking about walking in harmony the last couple of weeks, that we're to walk in unity, and we're to walk in purity. And there are certain actions and attitudes that we are to take off because they are incapable with Christianity. And there are actions and attitudes that all of us need to put on. And God desires that there be harmony. God desires that things would run smoothly. God especially desires that there be harmony in 4 major relationships that we find ourselves in. Between us, the church, and the home, and beginning with the husband and the wife, by following God's design for marriage. And that's what I talked about last week. This doesn't mean 100% satisfaction or perfection. We won't ever experience true perfection in any of our relationships, I think, until we get to heaven. But the choice is ours. We can either listen to and obey God and do it His way, or choose to do things our way. But we have to understand that our choices do have consequences. And God has always given people the power to respond to Him with obedience or respond to Him with disobedience. And the results or consequences are attached to each response. In Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 11 and 20, we see that Israel was given a clear choice that they could understand. It was not out of reach to them. They could choose to follow God, or they could choose to not follow God. They could choose to obey His commands, or they could choose not to obey His commands and to disobey Him. And there would be blessings associated with their obedience, and there would be punishment connected with their disobedience. And so Israel chose to go their own way and leave God out and do things as they saw fit. And their nation crumbled. And the smoldering ruins of Jerusalem in 587 BC were a testimony to the fact that to choose other than God was to choose very unwisely. And so in a like manner, we have been given a choice also. One that we can understand. With an answer that is within our reach through the Word of God. And when homes and families, when husbands and wives and parents and children and single people disregard what God has to say, and they don't make Him and His Word the center of their homes and their lives, and they choose to just go in their own way, they too will suffer consequences. And the ruins of the American family, the drug abuse, the divorce, the crime, the rebellion of people, the dysfunctions, are all testimonies that many people have made the wrong choice because they left God out of their homes. And they too are like the Israelites. They have chosen unwisely. And so today I want to talk about the final 2 relationships where God desires there to be harmony. I'll talk about the relationship between the parent and the child, which is the second relationship in the home. And then we'll talk about the harmony at work between the employer and the employee. And in order for these both to work, both parties must know and perform their mutual responsibilities. And they each must do their part to follow God's design. And in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 to 9, God reveals to us what that design really is. But before I get into the teaching, I'd like to say this. I know that for some of you last week and maybe this week, you're going to feel like this doesn't really relate to you. You may not be married. You may not be married. You may be single. Maybe your children are grown and they're no longer living in your home. Or maybe you're not working, but you're retired. Or maybe you're unemployed. And somehow you just feel disconnected by the subjects. Well, in preaching through a book of the Bible, in which expository preaching is done, which is what I'm doing, I cannot just forget about certain subjects that are being spoken about in the Bible. And so I just ask you to just please bear with me if you fit into one of those categories. But remember this, there's still something that you can use in your own life from what I say. And for many, you may have children, you may have even grandchildren that could really use a good reminder of these things for their own lives in the home or at work. You could purchase a CD and give it to them, or you could give them a sermon album. They're available. And for those who are single, you never know. Maybe God will send you your shining light in the future. You never know. That said, let's continue. First of all, there's to be harmony in the home. Well, what's the child's responsibility in the parent-child relationship? In Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 to 4, it says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. And fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." You see, the responsibility of the child is to obey the parents. In Colossians, the sister letter to this letter, it says, "Children, obey your parents in everything, because this pleases the Lord." You see, this is what God says. And it doesn't matter what the schools, what the media, or what anyone else says. If you are a Christian, you do what God says. And if you choose to disregard God and not live like a Christian, you are choosing to sin. God can save you, but it's your choice. And yes, children do have rights, but they also have a responsibility, and that is to obey. And they are to obey in all things, and not simply the things that please them. There's two qualifiers to this command. First of all, it is given to children while they live under the parents' roof and are supported by them to obey. But Jesus said a time will come when a person will leave their father and their mother, and at that time they will be on their own. And so at this time the obligation to obey does not apply, because they're not under the parents' authority. But while they are in the home, they are under the parents' authority. And now I know that some things that muddy the water here are when grown children still want their parents to support them, just like they did when they were children. But they do not want the parents telling them what to do. They want their parents' money, their help, to bail them out in crisis. But they do not want their parents to advise or make suggestions. Don't tell me how to run my life. Just support it. And when a parent-grown-child relationship is like this, guess what? It usually spells trouble. And it also spells, in many cases, heartaches. The second is, it says, in the Lord. In other words, the child is obligated to obey as long as the obedience will not cause the child to violate the teachings of God. If a parent tells a child to lie or to steal or to cheat, the child has the right to resist. The child's responsibility in the parent-child relationship is to obey. And as children, honor their parents through obedience. And as the child grows into adulthood, they're still commanded to honor their parents. But that honor is now demonstrated not by obedience, but by appreciation and respect and caring for them. So now what's the parent's responsibility? You see, many times when children are disobedient, it is because parents have failed to fulfill their end of the bargain. They have failed to fulfill their God-given responsibility in the parent and child relationship. The child will find it so much easier to obey when the parents have fulfilled their God-given responsibility to them. As the parents submit to God's authority, and they submit to God's design for them and their marriage and their family, I believe it will be easier for the children to submit to the parents. As parents, the first responsibility in verse 4 says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children." That means don't make them angry. The word means to excite, to inflame to anger, to cause irritation and annoyance. And parents are not to do this. So what are some ways we as parents have done these things? Or maybe we're still doing these things. Being harsh, being unforgiving, being unfair, never listening, not spending real time with them, using shame and ridicule to get their child to obey, and never saying, "I'm sorry." Being inconsistent in their lifestyle, that do as I say philosophy. Or maybe placing unattainable expectations on them, and always saying no to everything. And when parents do this, they are exasperating their children. And God says, don't do that. What Paul says we are to do is this in verse 4. Instead, Paul says, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. If the parents follow this command, this positive command, they will find that they won't be exasperating their children. Parents have a responsibility to teach their children about the Lord. Wow. How many of us have failed at that? To bring them up in the instruction of the Lord and to teach them about the facts of the Lord. The word instruction means to impart understanding, to set right, to lay on the heart. The stress is on influencing not merely the intellect, but the will. The word in a sense is to admonish or to warn or to remind or to correct. And friends, this isn't just a saying. God is commanding us to instruct our children. It tells us this in other sections of the Bible as well. The ultimate responsibility for instructing children in the Lord, for teaching them about God, does not belong, as Paul says, to the teachers of Sunday school. It belongs to the parents. And there are obvious prerequisites for teaching the facts to our children. We must know the facts ourselves. And sadly, many parents don't. I'm not saying that somehow Sunday school isn't important. I believe Sunday school is very important. We appreciate all the help we have for our Sunday school and the children that come and that we're able to teach them. But do you really think 1 hour a week, 1 hour a week, is going to teach them a lot? I don't think so. The parents have a part in this, and they need to continue it in the home. And remember this. What the children see in the home as to their parents' commitment will influence them in their commitment in the future. When parents bring their children here to be baptized, they are making a covenant between themselves, between God, and this church, that they will teach their children about the things of God and the faith. And we as a church are here to fulfill what our part is in that covenant. But the parents have to fulfill their part also. And in many, many cases, they do not. And that, my friends,